So I wrote to the White House and I said, listen, there's all these labs in Wuhan. There's all these labs in China, including two in Wuhan, that are getting NIH money. This probably deserves some investigation to determine what's being funded there. So we went and met with the White House in early January 2020. We went with Louise Linton, Steve Mnuchin's wife. He was the Secretary of Treasury at the time. She's a big animal person, supporter of White Coat. And the three of us went to meet with a staffer at the White House and we gave them the list of laboratories, discussions. Again, there was conversations about Wuhan happening. So we were like, this could be a problem. We think this deserves some attention. And there were other issues we talked about too with them. We were working on dog testing issues at the VA. We talked about that with them. Human fetal tissue experiments using animals. Most fetal tissue research is using animals, 90% of it. So we talked about that. A few of our other issues, but Wuhan was the topic of discussion. And we leave and follow up, and nothing really ever came of it. And we gave it a few months. And then I started to try to pitch members of Congress and media. For months, I'm like, we're sending money to this lab in Wuhan. They're doing coronavirus experiments. Like, this needs to be investigated. And it was like crickets. And then finally, in April of 2020, I talked to a reporter at the Daily Mail. And they had been looking at the issue. And we showed them the papers that we were funding experiments that involved going into the lab, the bat caves in southern China, collecting wild bats, swabbing them, taking these wild coronaviruses, taking them thousands of miles back to the lab in Wuhan, in a city where there aren't really wild bats, people don't come in contact with bats, supercharging those viruses, and voila, a pandemic caused by a bat coronavirus that was engineered in a laboratory breaks out. Daily Mail runs with it. It goes viral immediately. Matt Gaetz was on Tucker a few days later. Matt Gaetz gets off Tucker. I get a call from his office saying President Trump just saw Matt on Tucker. He wants to know what he can do to cut this grant off. And a couple of days later, they were having their daily coronavirus briefings at the time. Trump goes on TV. This is tremendous waste. We're cutting this grant off. And that's what set the fire for the Wuhan lab leak. Media storm that has never stopped. Is we were getting torn apart by the center-left media saying we're conspiracy theorists. People in the center-right are finally waking up to it and saying, yes, this does sound credible and we need to investigate. And all of a sudden, we had dozens and dozens of members of Congress coming and saying, what do we need to do? Trump cut the grant off, and now we've spent the last 3 years trying to get an investigation into what actually happened there and make sure no more money goes there ever again. And you'd be surprised what a challenge this has been to just make sure the Wuhan Institute of Virology alone doesn't get any more taxpayer dollars. The laboratory that did these experiments, the laboratory that took its database offline, the laboratory run by the CCP that has refused to cooperate in any investigation, the NIH, as of today, still authorizes them to get more taxpayer dollars.
Yeah.
So we've been trying creative solutions for the last 3 years to cut the money off there, at least make some kind of conditional defund that cuts off some of the money. And actually, thanks to your group and ACU and FreedomWorks and some others, we sent a letter last month asking for the omnibus bill, which I know there's a lot of problems with. But one good thing that came out of it is we prevented funding for certain bad things, including funding experiments with particularly dangerous pathogens in countries of concern, like China. So we are making some progress, but you'd think that the Democrats and Republicans, we could at least get to agree we shouldn't be sending money to Wuhan. That hasn't been the case.